This is ARC PDX.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogle. Let's begin with a live look at the state capitol in Salem as we quickly approach the end of the legislative session on Sunday. This morning, we are diving deep into what state lawmakers got done and the biggest storylines of the session. The dominant storyline of the session is the battle over transportation funding. We're diving into where things stand right now, and we're digging into a new legal challenge that will add a whole other twist to this story. Another big item on the to-do list for lawmakers this short session was balancing the budget. We got details on the bill that sits on the governor's desk right now that would reverse federal tax changes at the state level. Plus, we are tracking what lawmakers still need to get passed before the end of the session, including the bill that creates the framework for the state government to fund renovations at the Moda Center. But let's start with the biggest topic that we've been tracking since last year, the future of Oregon's transportation funding. Whether or not the gas tax referendum moves from November to May is now in the hands of a Marion County judge. The bill moving that vote passed both chambers and was signed by Governor Tina Kotek earlier this week. Those behind the effort to send the transportation tax increases to the ballot filed a lawsuit arguing that the move is unconstitutional because voters signed a petition with the November date on it. They're also challenging how the tightened timeline affects the voter pamphlet process. The bill signing came nearly a week after the Oregon Secretary of State suggested deadline for election officials to have enough time to prepare the ballots. The plaintiffs of the lawsuit say the compressed schedule makes collecting signatures for voter pamphlet statements nearly impossible for their volunteers.
That bill collapses the election framework midstream and interferes with the referendum process. This is not simply a policy dispute about transportation funding. This is about constitutional rights.
Democrats have argued that moving the referendum up gives state and local governments better clarity to plan projects and balance budgets. A hearing on this lawsuit is set to happen Tuesday afternoon. And this morning, there's a new federal civil rights lawsuit challenging moving the referendum from November to May. It's focused on the shortened timeline to collect signatures to submit a voter pamphlet statement. Oregon law requires a $1,200 fee for anybody who wants to submit a pamphlet statement. The alternative is to gather 500 verified signatures by a deadline. In this case, that would be March 12th. The plaintiff is a 73-year-old woman who uses a wheelchair. And according to the legal complaint, the plaintiff's lawyer argues that if she worked 8-hour days until the deadline, she would only have around 56 hours to gather 500 signatures. Court documents also say that the plaintiff lives on Social Security disability benefits at a fixed income of $1,400 a month. Therefore, she would not be able to afford the fee. The plaintiff is asking for the fee or the signatures to be waived, or for the referendum to be moved, to be blocked. We have reached out to the Secretary of State's office. They previously said they do not comment on pending litigation. A hearing for this is set to happen next Wednesday. And here is a timeline diving into how we even got here. It's long. ODOT is facing a major budget shortfall, with larger ones looming in future years. During last year's legislative session, lawmakers failed to get an $11.6 billion transportation funding bill across the finish line. Governor Tina Kotek called a special session a few weeks later. Lawmakers eventually passed a slimmed-down package at the end of September. Shortly after, Governor Kotek signed the bill in November, a Republican-led effort to bring the gas tax increases to Oregon voters was launched. They gathered more than 250,000 signatures to refer it to the November 2026 ballot. Early in the session, Democrats explored repealing the transportation package altogether to then work on a new funding bill, but they quickly abandoned that because of possible legal challenges. And during the session, the bill to move the referendum eventually passed after days of delays and negotiations in both chambers. The Senate vote was delayed 4 times and was delayed again in the House before House Speaker Julie Fahey moved the vote to March 2nd. The Speaker didn't say, though, why that vote was moved. Another key piece of legislation that passed during this session is a bill reversing certain federal tax changes at the state level. This rolls back 3 tax cuts in the federal spending bill passed by Congress last year. One ends a new tax deduction on car loan interest. Another limits business equipment write-offs, and the third removes certain stock tax breaks. Similar legislation has passed in other states. Some of the dollars will be used to expand Oregon's earned income tax credit. Supporters say this will not only put more money back in the pockets of working families, it will also help balance the state's budget. State analysts expect this to raise over $300 million over the next 2 years. Meanwhile, Republicans argue that this is just another tax on Oregon businesses.
We have schools that need to be open and roads that need to be able to function. We have fire and police that need to be able to respond. Government costs money.
By voting for Senate Bill 1507, you're taking away some small business lifeline. This is not theory. This is the lived reality of every business owner in this state.
Representative Ed Deal, who successfully led that referendum on transportation tax increases, says he's going to try to refer this bill to voters once it's signed into law. Petitioners who want to refer it will have 90 days to collect signatures once the governor signs the bill. Now let's get to the major bills that still need to be passed before this session ends on Sunday. So the House needs to vote on a bill that would provide the framework to pay for renovations at the Moda Center and the Rose Quarter. As we've been reporting, the Senate Budget Committee made changes to the bill to increase taxpayer protections. The conditions include requiring a finalized sale of the Trailblazers organization, creating a joint authority between the state and the city of Portland to oversee the arena, a minimum 20-year lease agreement with the team, and financial commitments from the city and Multnomah County. It also requires approval of the project scope, budget, and construction timeline before financing moves forward. Senator Kate Lieber, the co-chair of the Joint Budget Committee and a sponsor of the bill, says these are stronger safeguards than typical state bond projects.
The Blazer organization's already here, and the fastest way to economic development is to keep what you have. If we lose them, we will lose economic development.
Lawmakers will still need to pass a separate bill that would let the state borrow money for the project. The state plans to sell $365 million worth of bonds to raise the cash to get the work going. There is a vote scheduled on that bill before the end of the short session. Taxes collected from performers, athletes, and others who work at the Moda Center would then repay that bond debt, plus interest, over 20 years and fund further maintenance at Moda. During a hearing last month, Portland Mayor Keith Wilson said the city is developing a plan that includes $120 million in upfront capital and an extra $14 million a year for ongoing improvements. Multnomah County Chair Jessica Vega-Peterson says the county would commit around $88 million from existing revenue sources like the motor vehicle rental tax. Across the state, the city, and the county, the contributions would total about $600 million. Okay, another bill on the docket today would have a major impact on the recreation industry. We've talked about this a lot here on ARC PDX. This week, state leaders reached a deal on Senate Bill 1517, which would allow operators to enforce liability waivers in Oregon. As we've reported extensively here, a 2014 Oregon Supreme Court ruling weakened the enforceability of liability waivers and made it easier for plaintiffs to use for ordinary negligence. Recreation businesses from large ski areas to small gyms say the ruling exposed them to more lawsuits and made Oregon far riskier for insurers. This raised rates and also led to a number of specialized insurers leaving the state completely. Senate Bill 1517 passed the Senate with exceptions that would allow people who sign waivers to sue under different circumstances. Supporters argue that they were necessary to protect Oregonians' right to sue. This week, a House committee added amendments that would tighten those exceptions. Here's what they had to say before passing it through committee.
We might need to refine language around the exceptions, and I'm committed to getting that right for as long as it takes. Our goal is to achieve the goal of bringing insurance back to the market and making it available for the industries that Oregonians cherish so much. I know that not everyone is happy, as you noted, but I can say that I think we have a deal that is workable and that will bring insurance back into the market.
Again, reemphasize, no one got everything they wanted. The western states, of which we are the only one that doesn't allow waivers for ordinary negligence, all differ in the way that they do provide that waiver for ordinary negligence. So it wasn't such that we could just pluck another state's or a model statute and figure out how to do this. So it really was us trying to sort it out. And we that have been in the middle of this for a long time, and a lot of hours, believe this is a good Oregon solution, but absolutely ready to tweak it if and when we find out that it's not quite right.
So under this bill, customers would still be able to sue under certain circumstances. That includes incidents involving improper maintenance or inspection of safety equipment, negligent hiring, training, supervision of an employee, and abuse or physical or sexual assault. Welcome back, everybody, to our ARC on the Road coverage of the end of the Oregon short legislative session. We are looking at what lawmakers have been able to get done, and that includes a controversial bill which now sits on Governor Tina Kotek's desk. House Bill 4134 raises the statewide lodging tax paid by hotel and rental guests. Supporters say the bill raises additional revenue to fund wildlife conservation, habitat restoration, and anti-poaching efforts. Opponents argue that raising the tax could discourage tourism and add new pressure on Oregon's hospitality industry. Lawmakers also passed a series of immigration-related bills in response to federal immigration action. The bills bar immigration status from being used in most civil cases. They protect against certain warrantless police entries onto private property and require clear officer ID while restricting when officers can wear masks. Everybody, and welcome to ARC PDX. I'm Wesley Ogol. Let's take a live look at the state capitol in Salem as we quickly approach the end of this legislative session on Sunday. This morning, we are diving deep into what state lawmakers were able to get done and what they still have on the docket. From the transportation referendum, funding the Moda Center renovations, and changes to the tax code, this session had a number of major storylines. So this morning, we're getting insight from our reporter who was in the halls of the state capitol almost every day of this session. So joining me live now is our Salem Bureau reporter, Vasili Varlamos. Vasili, thanks for getting up early and doing this for us.
Yeah, great to be here.
So, okay, let's start with what are maybe some of the things that stood out most to you this session?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things lawmakers were tasked with this session was fixing the budget. You know, Governor Kotek was warning about 5% cuts, 2% cuts to the budget. She directed all state agencies to limit their spending as much as possible ahead of this session. And from budget writers I talked to, they said that made a significant difference for them and allowed for them to cut a lot more vacancy savings than they were expecting, which did give them a lot of room to not cut into programming and not into make a lot of those deep cuts that they had been warning about before. So a lot of cuts to programming really aren't happening anymore. We are in a much better budget picture than what we were before too, and that's also thanks to some revenue forecasts that were better than expected, both in November and also in February too. So lawmakers came in, did a good job addressing one of those priorities there, and transportation funding too was another one that really stuck out to me, specifically about this referendum. Because lawmakers, are still very divided on this. And this is still a issue, even though this bill has passed and the governor has signed the bill to move the referendum on transportation tax increases from November to May. There's now a state lawsuit, a federal lawsuit on this referendum moving to May. So that issue still remains unsolved, and we'll likely be dealing with it for months to come.
Yeah, so those were two of the priorities I remember you told us about when we had you on ARC on the Road before the session started. So we had the budget, transportation, and then also immigration is one we talked about. So do you think the lawmakers feel they were successful at addressing these top priorities?
When I spoke with one of the budget writers, one of the co-chairs of the Joint Ways and Means Committee, she said that, the budget is in a much better picture now, but there's still going to be a lot of issues that they have to address when they go into 2027. And that's due to the gas tax revenue, the gas tax bill that addresses revenue that ODOT, needs in order to fix its $242 million budget hole. But lawmakers for this current biennium were able to use vacancy savings to kind of make that up. They're also diverting some money from project delivery and also some DMV hiring, and they are moving that over, or in a lot of projects that are unspent too, they're moving those funds over in order to, fund ODOT just through 2027, or just through 2026, excuse me. Into 2027, they're going to have to, make some changes and find a way to fund ODOT for the long term. So that priority is fixed for the short term, but not necessarily for the long term. I talked about the budget earlier, and lawmakers yesterday passed several of those immigration bills too. So they did address those priorities, but there's still a lot of work to do as we head into 2027.
Yeah. Does anything surprise you about how this session has gone so far?
I think the biggest surprise would have to be just the divisiveness around the referendum. You know, we had a full year of talking about transportation, this debate. They had a lot of room to, find time to figure out what to do. And after they're still just very far apart on what they want from this referendum and when they want it. And, this divisiveness really bled into the session. There was multiple days where lawmakers, didn't even hold a floor session, whether it was in the House or in the Senate, solely because they couldn't agree on this one issue. So I guess that was the most surprising thing, was how long this referendum argument stuck with lawmakers and how long it took for them to ultimately figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we all anticipated it being combative about the transportation issue, but I think it's surprising, like, how divisive it was and kind of dramatic it was during the session in terms of that. Which of the accomplishments or, the bills that have been passed, which of those do you think are going to have the biggest impact on our actual, day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about tax increases and the tax code changes, which impact some people but don't impact a lot of people. But one tax that people are going to be paying when they stay at hotels or short-term rentals, there's a tax increase on that people pay when they go to hotels or short-term rentals. And that was just recently passed as of Wednesday. So whenever you go to those, you're going to be feeling that. Also on the screen there, you see skiing. There was a big bill that passed yesterday with a lot of support from lawmakers. It passed 55-2 out of the House. And that addresses liability waivers for skiers and just anybody recreating. That could be even when you're going to the gym. You have to sign your liability away, and in most cases, you won't be able to sue for negligence anymore unless it's gross negligence. So when you are going, skiing or stuff like that, you are going to have to be signing those waivers now. And ski resorts have said that insurance costs are rising, and they're having trouble, getting insurance now because of those liability waivers. So this is a big thing lawmakers wanted to fix this session, and they were able to do it.
Okay, so we have like 3 days left of the session. It ends on Sunday. What are things that you've heard that still need to get done, or would you be surprised that don't get done in these next 3 days?
Yeah, the biggest thing right now is the Moda Center renovation. There's two different bills that lawmakers need to pass. Senate Bill 1501, which sets up the framework and the rules around how they're going to fund this $365 million project. Now, that is currently sitting in the House, and that's likely going to get its final approval today. But the biggest thing is they also have to pass a separate bonding bill, which actually okays the state to, sell off those bonds, borrow money in order to pay for this renovation up front. And so they're going to have to pass that out of the Senate first, and then it has to go to the House, but they also have to wait a day. The only way they wouldn't have to wait a day would be if Republicans agreed to suspend these legislative process rules. And those House Republicans have said that they're not comfortable with doing that, and they need this bill to go through the normal process that it would go through like any other bill. So once it moves to the House, it's going to take an extra day. This may even last until the last day of session. There were a lot of lawmakers that spoke to me saying that they, wanted to get out of there on Friday, but because of the legislative rules being suspended, it's going to end up going into the weekend. So the Moda Center bill is the biggest one. There's also a bill that deals with, tax breaks for big businesses, except for data centers. That one is also going to receive a House vote later, or a Senate vote later today. There's also a bill about farm stores too. That's been a big topic for those in that industry as well. So there's a couple of things that lawmakers still need to figure out, but a lot's been done over the last 33 days. Yeah. So as we head into day 35, there's still a lot of things that need to be figured out.
And I'm so impressed that you're even able to keep all of this straight in your head, Vasili. You're so impressive. But I've also been watching your pitch emails come in every day. And there are a lot of other bills that we haven't even talked about here on ARC PDX. Is there anything that you think maybe should have gotten more attention this session that didn't?
I guess there was a bill that just passed yesterday. I had covered it before the session, but it had to do with, protections in AI and AI chatbots. That has been a big one because, it's an evolving industry, and a lot of people, say that there needs to be more safeguards in there, especially for children, which is what this bill does. So that's what I think, needs a little bit more attention. And as we head into 2027, lawmakers have also said that they want to address that issue even more, specifically on the floor. When they were voting on that yesterday, they said they want to attack this issue a little bit more. And then also, too, in terms of energy costs, that's going to be a big talk as we head into 2027. That data center bill is a big one there, too, that we'll need to get into more and more if that bill ends up passing and goes into law. We'll have to dig into, where are these tax breaks going? What businesses are we trying to attract? And, how is that going to benefit the state going forward? So those are two bills that, do need a little bit, we probably will need to touch on more as the months go on and these bills start to take effect. But yeah, it's been an interesting session so far.
And I'm sure you will be very happy when it is over after Sunday, Vasili. Thank you so much. We are so lucky to have you. Still impressed with how your brain keeps that all straight in there. Thank you so much, Vasili.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, welcome back. Our deep dive into the end of Oregon's short legislative session continues. And before the session began, I talked with leaders from both sides of the aisle about their biggest priorities. This morning, we're checking back in with them to see if they delivered. Now, unfortunately, at the last moment, Senate Majority Leader Casey Jama was unable to join us live this morning for the Democrats' perspective. But Republican Representative Shelly Boshart Davis is joining me live now. So thank you so much, Representative, for joining us on ARC PDX.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and good morning.
Good morning. Okay, so let's start with, what do you see as your caucus's biggest accomplishments this session?
Well, thanks for asking that. I think that my caucus definitely made some advances in different areas that are very important to both their districts and to the state of Oregon. So I'll just go through a couple of them. Representative Edwards was able to pass House Bill 4151, which increases the penalty for swatting. Basically, it was a Class A misdemeanor. It escalated to a Class C felony. And really, across the nation and right here in Oregon, we've seen emergency systems exploited to create fear and chaos. And this was bipartisan legislation to make Oregon safer. And that's always a good thing. And so that was a big win for us. Representative Mannix passed Chris Steele's law, and that was named after somebody in Colorado. And that corrects a dangerous gap in the current system by recognizing in domestic violence and stalking cases, speed saves lives. And so it created some regulation around how quickly they have to release some of this information. Representative Reschke created a corporate excise tax credit, which was House Bill 4052. And in short, that's just intended to make the formation of new community banks possible in Oregon. And then Representative Wright, across the House floor yesterday in some very robust debate, was able to truly save the Bay Area Hospital in Coos Bay, which is incredibly important to that part of rural Oregon. And that was very bipartisan and was definitely a big win for Representative Wright. So those are just a handful of bills that the caucus was able to accomplish.
And of course, we know Oregon faces a significant budget shortfall. You have to balance the budget before you guys adjourn on Sunday. Were you able to do that?
Well, today, sine die is imminent, and that should be crossing the floor and both the House floor and the Senate floor today. So we'll see if that passes. It should. And so that is our constitutional, obligation. I believe that we will get it done, but it's still yet to pass.
And what still needs to, besides that, what still needs to get done before the session ends on Sunday? And then is there anything that you wish you had been able to get done that you couldn't?
Well, there's a couple more big wins that we would be able to accomplish. One of them was my bill, House Bill 4130, still needs to cross the Senate side today, and that protects farmers' special farm tax assessment, and that would be a big win for farmers. And also Representative Breeze Iverson's bill on farm stands, and so both of those will be crossing the Senate. So I'm very excited about that. I think the biggest thing that we should have done, or wish that we would have done, and that is when we're looking at our business climate and knowing that we're some of the worst in the nation as far as business friendliness. We're 35th for business competitiveness, and that's down from 7th in the nation just 6 years ago in 2019. So the trend is certainly negative, and we could have passed bills, we could have reduced regulation, we could have reduced taxation, and at the very least done no harm. to the business community and the environment that we're certainly struggling in. And instead, we passed the disconnect, which we absolutely shouldn't have in Senate Bill 1507. And so we pay some of the highest income taxes in the country. We should have done things, passed bills, reduced regulations in order to make the business environment better for Oregonians. And I think we have right now the third highest unemployment. And for some reason, there's these red flags out there, and we're seeing the headlines every day. And we certainly should have paid more attention to that, and we didn't. And I think for me, that's the biggest disappointment.
Okay, I want to talk about the biggest, probably hot topic of the session, the transportation referendum vote. What do you make of how that vote went down to move it to the May ballot, and what happens next?
Well, I think at the very core of it, it's wrong. We should have not been able to do that. You're talking about Senate Bill 1599. I was on the committee. I truly believe that 1599 was put into place to rig the election. We know that 250,000 Oregonians stood in the rain and took their time and sacrificed in order to get the gas tax on the ballot, and very specifically the gas tax on the ballot in November. It stated it on the sheet. I made sure and put that, I put the actual sheet with the date circled on the floor desk every single day as a reminder, this is what Oregonians signed. And so this is just a way to circumvent the will of the people. And for some reason, the Democrats in the legislature decided to say very, very loudly that we don't care what you think. We know better than you do. And it's a slap in the face to the referendum process. It's a slap in the face to every Oregonian that signed this and said, we want the vote in November. And truly, the Democrats that are not listening to the people should be held accountable. And they're trying to do legislative gymnastics to get out of their poor decision making. And we're seeing the pushback still today as we see a federal lawsuit being dropped yesterday, a state lawsuit dropped as well. And so this is now in the hands of the courts. But I truly believe that is a travesty that happened this session, where we should have listened to not us, the Democrats should have listened to the will of the people, and they just chose not to.
Okay, we got about a minute left, and I want to stay on this topic because, like, no matter when Oregonians vote on this, in May or November, all of our polling, everything we're hearing suggests that they're going to vote it down. They're not going to accept these gas tax increases. So what is the plan to fund ODOT after we assume it will probably fail?
Well, I think the first thing that has to happen, and I agree with you that I do believe that it's going to be voted down, and if those in charge of this state decide that they want to have a bipartisan process, a bipartisan table of bipartisan ideas, that is the only way, and historically the way that we have funded our transportation system. And I stand ready to be part of that process if they actually want to listen to Republican voices. As you know, we had ideas and bills we put forth in the long session that wasn't looked at, and ironically, they used exactly some of those ideas in order to balance the budget even for this session. So I look forward to those conversations that I will be honest have not started yet, and I believe that to be a travesty. If we can come together in a bipartisan way, I think that we can do a lot of good for the state, specifically when it comes to infrastructure and transportation.
Representative Shelly Boshart Davis, really appreciate your time this morning. I know you're very busy at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are wrapping up our On the Road deep dive into the end of Oregon's short legislative session. We dug into the biggest storylines of the session, including the transportation referendum, changes to the tax code, and the funding to renovate the Moda Center. We also just heard from a Republican representative about how their caucus feels about what they were able to get done and what they weren't able to get done. And if you want to see the full deep dive again or share it with your friends and family, just point your phone's camera at the QR code on your screen, and that will take you right to the ArcPDX YouTube page where you will be able to see the show in full. Thank you all so much for joining us on ArcPDX. We go on the road once a week to dive into the biggest topic that is authentic and relevant to all of you. So please let us know what topics we should tackle next. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.